Alright, hello everybody. I am whatever the hell my YouTube name is going to be. And this video is mainly just to have me explain some rules of mapping that I have personally developed over time. As I've tried to map out things. And by mapping out things, I mean mapping out the entirety of the early Middle Ages because of this weird ass Wikipedia thing that I decided to do 3 years ago that's still carrying on with me now. Anyway, enough with that. Firstly, I want to credit GIMP and also Wikimedia Commons for providing this beautiful map, and GIMP obviously for allowing me to edit it in the first place. And what I mean by rules of mapping, specifically, I mean rules of political mapping. Now, firstly, if you don't know what a political map is, essentially, a political map is supposed to be a map where that is supposed to represent political boundaries of certain countries and realms. So say you have those modern day atlases that you see in classes, or I mean somebody must have had an atlas book before. Let me give you let me give you a quick view of what a political map is supposed to look like at least. To take this, let me paste it out here real quick. Take this Atlas of Europe over here. And you see how this map specifically lists out countries and also important cities. This is the main sort of spirit for a political map. A political map is for representing countries and sometimes the situation of countries as well. So in this map here, you have countries as well as their cities, which represent sort of centers of population and where most of the country's inhabitants live. Now, I've been looking at these political maps a bunch, mainly thanks to Paradox Games, although also thanks to r/imaginary maps for providing inspiration. Man, that subreddit is something else. It's amazing. Anyway, there's if you want to create a map like this, there's a few main things that you want to take away from this. Firstly, there's countries. Now, as opposed to other types of maps, such as physical maps or data maps, political maps really only care about countries and sort of relationships in countries, or relationships between countries. As you can see here, Denmark is colored in, as well as the Faroe Islands. Actually, that's not the color it's supposed to be. Look at the world. But as you can see here, Faroe Islands, it says Denmark. That shows a political situation where the Faroe Islands is sort of owned by Denmark. Greenland here too, it says in parentheses Denmark, because Greenland is technically part of Denmark, though at the same time it's kind of its own thing. That's the main gist of political maps, that it's supposed to show countries and sort of what situation those countries are in compared to other countries. Now, since it's the present day, this political map of Europe is kind of boring because, we have rules and regulations and we have a whole European Union to deal with that. And honestly, it's kind of surprising that this map right here has not mentioned the European Union, since that's kind of a country too. Though I'll get to that later. There are certain things that I've seen and haven't seen political maps do over time, and over time I've sort of made my own rules in order to follow, in order to provide sort of the best information that one could, the best and most necessary information that one would need when looking at a political map, in order to analyze what the relationships between countries are. Before we get to it, another thing that I also want to mention is the difference between de facto and de jure. Now, these two things are, you probably heard of them before, but essentially the difference between de facto and de jure is that a de facto situation is a situation of actuality, of what is actually happening, while a de jure situation is sort of legally what the situation is, or legally how should people treat it. So in this map here, you see that Crimea is part of Ukraine, because de jure, Crimea is part of Ukraine. All other countries recognize that Crimea is part of Ukraine, and Ukraine still sort of tries to administer Crimea. However, de facto, the actual situation is that Russia actually controls a lot of Crimea, and because of that, you get the whole war in Ukraine that's been going on for for I don't know how long this time. That's something that I feel like the need to. That's something that I feel the need to sort of like leave out. Like, that's something that I feel the need to like emphasize, because by emphasizing that, there's going to be a lot of questions that we're going to need to answer. As in map making, there's a lot of decisions that you have to make as to what you truly want to represent. And sometimes you're not able to represent one thing without misrepresenting the other thing. In this case, per se, Crimea is owned by Ukraine, despite the fact that Russia actually administers the place. There's going to be a lot of stuff like that, and also confusing situations, especially thanks to a little thing called feudalism, which I don't know if I'm going to talk about feudalism in this episode. Probably something else, just like complaining about it and how freaking ridiculous it is to map in. Honestly, I gotta give Crusader Kings a bit of credit there, because they did a pretty good job at mapping all that stuff out. Now, where in the... Oh, here it is. I wanted to color this in, because this is supposed to be Russian. It's supposed to be Russian. Why isn't it Russian? I don't know, honestly. I'm just gonna... Oh, hey, look at that works. Ah, too much. Let's lower it down. Whoop, whoop, whoop. There we go. Now that would be like the de facto situation right now, although Russia's doing a little bit of trolling in Ukraine. Apart from that too, so it's going to look more like this. Anyway, let me not get too distracted out here. I'm here to present maps. Here I've already done a little bit of things. Tried playing around, although for this sort of like pre-episode, I would call it, let's focus on the English channel, since that's kind of where I know how to draw a few countries. Let's see. Okay, mapping countries. Maps, the ideal tool of navigation and fascination of history of us teenagers across the globe. Having been lurking in the ladder community for a while, I've seen my fair share of maps. Yeah, I've already gone through this. r/imaginary maps is an amazing place. Now, I wonder if anyone has genuinely thought, man, I wish there was a video that could show the basic guidelines for making country maps. I don't think people have. And I'm going to get this other thing out of the way. I'm not a good drawer. So, my examples are going to be crudely drawn, like pictures and weirdly drawn borders of countries, because I'm not a good drawer. And frankly, that is something that I also want to state in the video. I feel like you shouldn't be a good drawer in order to draw maps. I mean, it's definitely something that you'd like to have, but you don't exactly have to be all like freaking next Van Gogh in order to like draw a really detailed map and stuff like that. Really, there's only some bare essentials that you need that everybody else should be able to understand. And that's sort of what I want, the main idea that I also want to like let out in this video. Like, you can be the best drawer in the world, but in the end, if your political map doesn't communicate like the core things that a political map is supposed to communicate, then it's not really doing a good job at it, no matter how good it looks. And frankly, I'm not one about looks, but I respect the people who do care about looks, and frankly, their work should also be respected, even if it may have flaws. Why can't I? Wonder how my voice sounds. Bruh, I'm trying to open. Hold up. This thing freeze? No, this thing froze. Okay. I'll say a disclaimer, this is my personal opinion. I've already gone through this. Okay, step one. Step one! You have to choose a map. And for this one, I chose a map provided by Wikimedia Commons because I do not know how to give credit yet, and honestly, I don't want to get into that whole situation. I truly respect the people who make these. I truly want to respect the people who make these, and if me not knowing how to give proper credit, I don't want to risk it. Just like disrespecting somebody's work by just providing it with inadequate credit. So essentially, if you want to choose a map, you really shouldn't think too much or like too deep about it. Essentially, what region do you want to map out, and yeah, what region do you want to map out, and like how well do you want to map out that region? One thing that I would say though is, firstly, the higher the resolution of the map, the better it's going to be, just by nature, firstly, and also just by the fact that the higher the resolution, the more detail you're going to be able to add to a map, to your political map. And by nature, the more detail you add, it's going to look a lot better. That's my personal opinion, though. Although it's always a rule of thumb, the higher the definition, the higher quality the map is going to at least look like. Also, a good reference for a map would always be necessary. So I know people like to use David Rumsey a lot, since they have some amazing maps to provide, and they're usually also really, really high resolution. So, okay, that's about it for choosing a map. No example here. Borders. If there's an example for any border that I would like to mention in this video, it's the 49th parallel border, just because it's a straight line. It's almost comical just how straight the line is. Like, I know oversimplified made the whole joke, like straight line, but it truly was just like straight line, and nobody bothered to like find any more intricacies with it. And honestly, props on them. Borders mark international political boundaries and sea boundaries. Yep. So you probably know what a political border is, right? We talk about it all the time here in the United States, and especially with Mexico. The border with the U.S. and Mexico, man. That's a whole other 2-hour conversation right there. Essentially, for your map, what you're going to want to do is create a border firstly between the sea, but then also between other countries. So let's actually start drawing some countries here to provide an example. You got, let's see, is it like Norfolk, Suffolk? I'm butchering these so hard, but honestly, if you're British, you can leave a comment down below and complain all you want. You got London, and you got like Kent is something like this. You got Sussex. Actually, we're not drawing Sussex. And then you got like Holland. So as you can see here, like even from these lines that I drew, you're already able to see what shape a country is, and the borders are very important because it is the borders that then demonstrate to the viewer of the map the shape of a country and like how the country interacts with the geography around it. Some people, another thing that I like to mention is that some people actually don't like to draw borders, and instead what they do is draw what's called like a borderless countries. Essentially, say you got like a country here, then you draw like another country right here, and the difference in color is what changes their border, but it's specifically like what marks their border. But I wouldn't recommend this too much because you run into some problems later, especially if you try to demonstrate anything more complex than just like simple, this country's right here, this country's right there. It looks aesthetically pretty pleasing though. I would admit that, but I would just recommend not to add too much, not to use too much borderless countries like that, because you reduce the potential to demonstrate certain relationships between countries later on. After that, you want to After that, another thing that I've also seen is with countries is like they have interior borders as well, and in order to mark like even more the difference in the borders and like to mark the borders even more. What am I saying? That is more of an aesthetic decision that I've seen. It's not. I mean, it's one that like that I am okay with, though. I feel like interior borders could be used for other things in the line, especially when demonstrating sort of like interpersonal, not international unions. Is that how it's called? Let me bring up the map real quick. Alright, let me stop humming for a bit. Real quick, you're humming. Okay, wait. Oh, of course now I'm not able to find anything. Come on, something? Something? Nothing? Oh, well, we're not going to use any of these maps anyway. Alright. On to the next thing. What is the next thing even? Also, I guess a quick side note. Try to make your borders accurate to like the geography of any specific region, but at the same time, don't care too much about it. So, as you see here, you got Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex. These clearly are not the borders for Norfolk, Suffolk, and Essex, but get the idea that like people would recognize it enough and like would be able to relate enough to this sort of like weird shape to call and location to like make them identify as Norfolk, Suffolk, and Essex. All right, wait. Let me. Is it possible to take a break? I'm starting to slip up here. All right. Oh yeah, I can. All right, we back. We back. What's next? Oh, nice country colors because everybody loves country colors, and especially I do. I got a few things to talk about when it goes to country colors. The concept of country colors honestly shouldn't be too difficult to like grasp. I hope. Essentially, every country deserves a color because that is the main way that like you're supposed to differentiate between two different political entities shown in a political map. Now, these country colors should preferably not be the color of the water because if not, it's gonna look like this. It's gonna look all weird. Or the color of the borders because then you just have like a solid black slate or like whatever the color of your border you decide it to be. Preferably also no colors very close to black, simply because it's gonna make your labeling go all weird, and also nothing too white. I try not to sound racist. Also, nothing too light white for reasons I'm gonna get to later as well. So, what about choosing a country color? Now, this is a personal pet peeve that I have that I've seen other people do. Is take this map. Come on. Take. Okay, wait. Okay, wait. Where is it? Where is it? Okay, here. Take this map, right? It's a map of Europe. Pretty good map of Europe at that. It's got some pretty accurate borders, some nice colors. But one thing you'll notice is that some countries have the same color. Some countries have the same color. And I really, really don't like that personally. Here's the thing. One of the special cases that you're going to get into if you ever decide on making political maps is a thing called exclaves and enclaves. An enclave is a part of a country that's completely inside another country, and an exclave is a part of a country that is not connected to any other part of the country. So, in this example here, there has to be an exclave. Shoot, is there really not no exclave? Okay, you see this little part here? I believe that's Dubrovnik. This Dubrovnik part is not part of the mainland Croatia. and therefore is considered an exclave of that. Now, who am I to say that that is an exclave? What if that is just a completely new country that like has no label, has no nothing? And it is perfectly fine to make maps without labels because stuff like legends exist. Who am I to say that France and Austria aren't part of the same country even though they're the same color? Because clearly there are some countries that aren't labeled. How about Corsica? How about that? I can see the map maker here did a good job at labeling these countries at least, and that sort of gets by with the whole like same colorness, but it just leaves so much ambiguity. And one of the like main things that a map maker should try and focus on is leave out ambiguity, because if there's ambiguity, that means you did a bad job at mapping. I would recommend, therefore, each country have its own specific color. If they have similar colors, that's fine, as long as it's not the same color. Also, another reason why should also be because, yeah, labels can be ambiguous. And also, all parts of a map of one color should be gone to the same political, should be part of the same political identity that you want to represent. That is just one of the postulates that I personally put up for mapping. One color should represent one political entity that you want to present onto a map. Now, for example, let's take these countries that I decided to make here. Making a unique color for each of them would signify that each one of them is its own unique political entity. So say you got Norfolk here, you got Suffolk here, East Anglia, Essex has always been a red. Holland, let's just make Holland blue. Actually, no, Holland likes, they're orange dudes, aren't they? Okay, let's make them a good shade of orange. London, you're a dark gray, I would say. It's all smoggy there. And Kent, I always imagine Kent as being pink for some reason. Is that pink? Yeah, it looks pink enough. Got 4 countries here, each with similar colors, but all of them have different colors, signifying that they're all part of they're all different political entities. Now, this would be especially useful because, say, what if Holland had a small trading post out here in Norfolk, in this let's say this area right here? How would we know that this wasn't a separate country or just another part of Holland? Now, this is before we're adding labels, but stuff like this should be easily and presentable in your map. And the more reinforce your messages, the better. I would say. Now, as for choosing color, here I made completely arbitrary colors, but unfortunately, the internet does not work that way. Map making does not work that way, apparently. And there are some specific rules that you want to follow when it goes to choosing your country's colors. Actually, no, not rules, but customs. So the example that I'm going to put up for this one is the British Empire. Since in many British Empire maps that you see online, or even during the time, you will see that, oh, this is a good one. Here's an old one. When you look at any map of the British Empire, heck, even this contemporary map, you will see that the British Empire is always a reddish, pinkish color. And there's some historical context to this because Britain has commonly been associated with the color red throughout its history, mainly thanks to its famous signature red coats that it commonly offers. These as an American, these are pretty drilled into my head. The red coats are the guys that we fought during the American Revolution, and also, oh, happy 4th of July, by the way. And because of this common association with red, due to the red coats and Great Britain is commonly painted as red in maps. Here's a more contemporary map of Great Britain by Duke I'm not saying that. No, Duke Nidhoger on DeviantArt who has this imaginary map of, wait, where is it? Here it is. Who has this map over here of the British, the French, and the Spanish empires on some sort of alternate history. As you can see here, the British Empire is red. The French Empire is blue. Now, French blue is also another really, really common sort of like mapping custom to go along with. I'm not too sure. Actually, no. This French blue, I'm pretty sure. I'm not 100% sure on this one, since at least the British red is most definitely has to do with the red codes. But I'm pretty sure French blue has to do with the House of Bourbon. The House of Bourbon has this flag right here that was a pretty big shade of blue, along with a bit of yellow, but nobody cares about that. And I'm pretty sure that the House of Capet also used the bluish hue for their French sort of like symbolism. And as a result, France has always been associated with the color blue. And as a result, you see a lot of maps using blue as France. Now, nobody's forcing you to use these colors whenever you're mapping. You can always just use like pink to paint France or something, like you will see in some history textbooks. However, I will say that a lot of people, at least in the map making community, will not appreciate that decision because of just precedent as far as I'm concerned. I frankly don't care, although I do care a little bit. But there's stuff like that. There's these sort of like weird rules in mapping when determining the country's color that aren't really spoken, but at the same time it's very, very clearly demonstrated, or like very, very clearly implied. And like if you don't follow it, you'll just get like deemed a heretic or something. To finish off, Spanish yellow is, I'm pretty sure Spanish yellow has to do with the Spanish flag. The flag of Spain is mainly a shade of yellow along with some warm colors. So Spain got associated with yellow pretty quickly. See here, it's red, yellow, very like yellowish. Like the yellow stands out more than the red because the red is in the borders. Let me just list down a few others from here. Germany is commonly painted as gray because I don't know, honestly. I'm pretty sure it's Paradox that made Germany gray and just everybody else went along with it. Although maybe it has to do with their World War I uniforms. Maybe. Sweden is painted as blue because, well, also Paradox, but also the Swedish freaking flag is blue, so well, I'm pretty sure that's actually more probable than Paradox. Russia, actually, I don't think Russia has a specific color. Greece is painted blue also because of its flag. The US is painted a lighter shade of blue, usually, because of its flag. The Qing is painted yellow because of its flag. Oh yeah, that's one thing I was going to say. A good way to determine the color of a country is to sort of like determine what color its flag is, because a country's flag is what it's most commonly associated. A country's flag is what is most commonly associated with that country. So, because of that, choosing a country's color based off a country's flag is like the most natural decision that one can make in regards to choosing a country color, since everybody will kind of just like subconsciously agree that yeah, that's the country's color right there. So, as I was saying, like a lot of places are deemed this specific color or that specific color mainly because of its flag. Italy is usually painted as green because it has green on its flag, and like the rest of its natural colors represent France, or also France's colors, so they're not really mentioned. Another thing that you can also base your colors out of is other like close cultural customs related to that country. Right now I was going to mention Saudi Arabia, which Arabs, if you see any map on Arabs, you're probably going to see that like most of their countries are painted as green, at least like in mapping communities for some reason, but also in Paradox games, which, I mean, same thing. This is, I'm pretty sure, has to do because Islam has a lot of emphasis on the color green, since I can't tell you why, honestly, but there's some connotation there. And because of that, since a lot of Arabs are closely associated with the Islamic faith, then a lot of Arab states are also painted green. Or at least Saudi Arabia. I mean, Saudi Arabia also has green on its flag, so that's also a good reason. That's also a good reason. Those are mainly the main two that like you're going to encounter people argue at least a country color should be over. It's the either the flag of the country, common sort of customs for making that country, like, or just like cultural background of the country. Anything else, then usually people won't judge you for it. So that's why, like, when I painted these imaginary countries, I didn't go like on hours of research thinking of like what color the country should be. Like, if the country's obscure enough, then like nobody's really gonna judge you for it. So be it. Is that it for country colors? Yeah. Oh yeah. Another thing that you can also use is flags no, apart from flags, it's also standards, since they're kind of like the precursor for flags. That's why usually you get when you see maps of the Roman Empire, or like that's why people, and by people I mean the mapping community, likes to make Rome a shade of red, since like that's usually what their standard color was, and that's also why Byzantium, or at least the Byzantine Empire, is painted. Actually, no. The color purple being related to the Byzantine Empire has to do more with cultural connotations, since Tyrian purple and like being born in the purple was pretty important part of like their court life. So they were kind of associated with the color purple as a result. And also, purple is the color of royalty. And what's more royal than a Roman emperor? Even though they're like did not like being told they were royalty for like a good part of their history. What else is there? Show up. Could you show up? Please. Come on. Come on. Come on, man. Come on, man. Alright, on to labeling. Now, in this part of the video, I'll just present like a basic atlas, because you see almost any atlas and you'll realize that like it has a label. Did I have an atlas here? Yeah, here you see labels: French Algeria, French West Africa, British Congo. Although another thing that you can do apart from labels is also make a legend. So I don't see too many people do this, although I feel like this is a equally as effective way of like labeling countries, is simply making a legend somewhere out where you're not mapping, and just like putting out the colors and then saying like what they're equal to. Like here, let's say this is going to be Suffolk, and like any connotation with this color is going to be related to Suffolk and like parts that Suffolk owns. Same thing here with Norfolk. Come on. And Holland. Forgive orange for a bit. This isn't even going on the right video, or the correct video. I would say that this is a pretty good way to make or like label countries if you don't have really the space for making labels. So let's say you're working in like sort of a pixelated view, you can't really make, I'm trying to make like tiny labels for tiny countries, which just like result in pixeling and doing their thing and not like being able to write text. So on the side you can just like create a label, a legend. For representing these countries. And that is actually what I did for my Middle Ages sort of like map here. So as you can see here in this map, you have so many feudal duchies that like trying to label them all is just going to be a pain. So instead of like making a cluster truck of just labels into this hellscape that is known as feudal France, simply create a label of all the country's colors and their subject colors, and just put them down like this. And honestly, I prefer this because like you're at least able to, even though you may have to look multiple ways, you're at least able to see like what country is what. Although this is more of a niche thing. The standard usually is to like add country labels because people usually aren't restricted by resolution or just like hellscapes known as feudal France. So, as mentioned previously, the higher the quality of your map, the higher the resolution of your map, the the easier it's going to be to like actually do stuff on it. Okay, on to labels. There's not much to say about labels, honestly. You want to if you want to make a label, just you should make a label. I'm not gonna tell you how because that's not the point of this video. Let's see. Let's just add some labels real quick to show off. Got Suffolk. Got Norfolk. Got Essex. Got. One thing that people usually do is like when the country's too small to like label, you just put it out to the side. So for example, here in Kent, you kind of like you can leave it down to the side a bit, like, and people will know this is Kent. Or something other people would like to do too is add numbers. So let's say like this country right here is too small and like you can't really properly label it. You can add numbers, and then in a legend, you just put 1. What? What the world? How is 0 found a thing? No, 12. What? Huh? Okay, wait. 1. London. The main one I can think off the top of my head that likes to do this is Alibi. And that's honestly kind of just stuck. Another pet peeve that I would honestly have is those mapping videos that just like any. Usually you see them like those history of the world map videos. This is a bit of a tangent. I don't think this is going to be in the video, but you just have like a generic like this country is not important, therefore I will not give it a color. Try to give every single one of your countries a color, just like for the sake of making a political map. I know like it's hard, and I know it's time consuming and sometimes not even that necessary, but it's sticking to principles sometimes is better than most other alternatives. What happened? What? Why can't I draw? Huh. Okay. After that, come on, open. After that, you're also gonna want to label regions and sea and like oceans. Although it's not obligatory, it's something that I would recommend. And it's always good to like label them in a different style, simply because they're different from labeling countries. That's usually a good idea, just to do it. I mean, this is more convention than anything else, but it's a good convention, I would say. Got the North Sea. I don't really like naming geographic things, mainly because people usually know it already. It's custom, though it's not like completely obligatory. What's next? After that, last thing is cities. Now, I personally, took me a while, but label cities are also a pretty important thing that you want to demonstrate in a political map. And while they're not directly countries, cities still say a lot about like the situation of the country. Cities still like play a big part into like how one can view a country. They demonstrate population density. They demonstrate important, geographically important locations, since that's usually where cities are built. And they. Alright, let me actually write this down. They make density, and they also mark geographically important locations. And like also they're also a really good flavor to add to like any sort of map, because it encourages you to like look deeper into what like how a country, just like look deeper into a country, more than just like its shape. And that's usually something pretty good. That's usually something that I would encourage a political map to do. Let me go on another break real quick. Alright, I'm back. And I've decided that we're not going to use this example, and instead we're going to use an example that I've already made prior to this video in order to demonstrate sort of like what cities should look like. So, firstly, making cities is a good idea. They represent a lot of things that I mentioned previously, like population density, important locations, and sort of like adds flavor to your map that may be needed if you ever have like some lore tier map, which, I mean, lore is cool, man. Anyway, first thing that I would say is cities don't, city marking doesn't have to be that deep. For the most part, people like putting a circle and below a small label for the circle. As you can see here, Cityville, Body, New Syracuse. Although you may have noticed that there are differences in these sort of like city circles. And I will get to that, because another of my pet peeves that I have been looking at maps is that sometimes all the cities are the same size. And for me, that just does not sit right, because cities are different sizes, and the size of the city can tell you a lot about its importance and why it's on the map. For example, here Cityville is clearly a larger circle than the city of Body, because let's say Cityville has a larger population. This will tell you a lot about what Cityville is. Perhaps Cityville is this random city that decided to become big. Why is it so big compared to Body? Why is Body small? Like, city sizes make a lot of add on to like the purpose of us putting cities on the map in the first place, for many of the same reasons. And I would say if you make all cities the same, then you're kind of like taking away from the purpose of adding cities to a map in the first place. Now, at least one differentiation in cities that people do like to make is capital cities, because they're the capital. That's where the government is located, and where like all other institutions are run from. And so clearly they're always more important. They're usually marked differently too. Here, New Syracuse is supposed to be the capital city of the Sicilian People's Republic, or Socialist Republic, whatever. So I added a bit of yellow. That's just ways to differentiate it from other stuff. People also like making the capital city a star. That's usually the main convention, although I couldn't find a good way to make a star on GIMP, because I suck at drawing. Hopefully you can see from these maps that I suck at drawing. But that's a story for another day. We're heading to the end here. Oh yeah, try to avoid clutter. Try not to like make the labels of the city interact too much with other types of labels. As you can see here, it's barely hits the standard for, I would say, clutter. Because if you have the need to add on too many labels, then I'd recommend you either do numbered labels or just begin using a legend, because you don't need no labels for a legend. And that's about it when it comes to actually drawing specific countries, but just drawing countries won't doesn't fulfill all of the needs of a political map, I would say, because say during let's see, take this map of Europe during the Cold War. This is a map of Europe provided by the Cold War, and it's usually the ones that you would see like in school textbooks and stuff. Look at how there are some states that are blue and some states that are red. If you know anything about the Cold War, this is clearly the East-West divide that went on during the Cold War, and there's even like a legend right here demonstrating like what the colors mean, and this is also why legends are important. Anyway, in the next episode we're going to be talking about subject relationships, since they're usually pretty important in determining like they're usually pretty important in determining exceptions to political relationships, especially when you're making stuff like that takes place in the past, where politics is just weirder, I would say. And that's about it. Oh, how long did this last? Oh my goodness, almost 50 minutes. All right, we're out of here.